You may have noticed that the subtitle of the conference this year is Infrastructure, Intelligence, and Innovation. And actually, we have one session keyed to each of those three topics. Before the coffee break, you heard two excellent presentations that followed the keynote that looked at various aspects of infrastructure. And the next two sessions will deal respectively with intelligence and subsequently with innovation. We have two speakers in each session. I'm going to introduce each of them before they talk, but I'm going to be very brief. There are full biographies on the conference website. To open our discussion of intelligence, we're going to hear a presentation on digital collections, the challenges for curation, and the opportunities for data-driven scholarship from Adam Farquhar from the British Library. Adam has had a very rich career in computational sciences and digital humanities, and has been at the British Library for quite a while, helping to sort through their digital strategy. I think he will offer a very provocative view of where digital collections are taking us. Adam, please come and join us.
Okay, so can you hear me reasonably well? Yep, great. So I'll try to keep myself from wandering off, which I kind of like to do. Okay, so I'd like to thank Liz for suggesting I come and join you today. And I'd like to thank the keynote speakers earlier this morning, because they really highlighted some of the issues that I see us organizations like the British Library also dealing with. So infrastructure and archiving digital information for the 1,000-year mark are two really important topics that maybe come up as well in this session in addition. So thanks, Cliff, for the introduction. So I'm currently head of digital scholarship at the British Library. And so we're all working in a kind of a shared context, right? So a shared context in which digital information and digital data are ubiquitous. And I also share a context with many of the folks here from national or research libraries. So the British Library, many of you will be somewhat familiar with. It's a national library in the UK. It's also a legal deposit library, and that means we receive copies of all the material that's published in the United Kingdom, along with several other copyright libraries like the Oxford and Cambridge libraries. We have two main functions. So we provide access to those collections for anyone who wants to use them, and then we preserve them for future generations. Our users are a pretty diverse community. About a substantial portion of them, a bit over half though, are coming from higher education in the UK, and so we have a very strong research-focused mission. We also provide exhibits and events for the general public and engage with schools through online workshops and online resources. We also run a document supply business, pretty much the largest in the world, one of the largest in the world, where we make digital copies primarily of documents, journal articles, and so on, and provide them to universities, government departments, private sector companies. Our collections are very broad. They cover pretty much all known subject areas, so arts and humanities. Too quiet. So I've been healthy all winter long, and last night my throat started. How's that? So I'll try to stick with that. Our collections cover pretty much all known subjects: so arts and humanities, social sciences, science, technology, and medicine. They also include pretty much every format, so sounds and images and video and newspapers and manuscripts and databases, even books, journals, stamps, photographs, you name it. And everything that we do now has a pretty strong digital element. The foremost here is probably the upcoming, finally, extension of the legal deposit legislation to cover non-print material. We've been waiting on it roughly since I got to the British Library several years ago now. And we think it will finally happen this year, so let's hope for the best. In addition to that, we have a strong tradition of voluntary deposit that helps us to acquire materials that aren't covered by the legal deposit, things like maps and audio and commercial music. So we share some challenges with a lot of you here at national research and public libraries around the world, and truly taking advantage of the possibilities of digital information is probably the chief among them. It's fair to say that today, most of us treat digital content a lot like we treat print content, right? So you search for it in much the same way, you order it in much the same way. In fact, you read the items one at a time in much the same way. So that's great, right? We can bring things up from the basement in a couple of seconds rather than 15 minutes. But that's not the end game. We need to collectively, I think, do much better than that. So I'll look at some examples in this talk. I'm going to try to highlight sort of three aspects of it. One, that information held in the library can and should be viewed as data. Second, that digital information can present some unique curation challenges, and that the digital information provides some unique opportunities for exploitation, including augmentation, visualization, and analysis. So let's see. So the British Library has been pretty seriously accumulating digital content for research use. So we've got something over 200 terabytes in our digital library system, and that includes a huge range of types of content: newspapers, audio, maps, e-journals, playbills. It's even got some books in there. And you can see from the chart that we're making pretty good progress. I often have to remind myself, however, that our digital holdings are only a tiny, tiny fraction of our print holdings. That's not going to change quickly either. So even with the introduction of non-print legal deposit, it will take us a long time before we have anywhere close to the depth and breadth of information in digital form. So while having that content in digital form enables researchers to do some very cool stuff, I have to kind of temper my enthusiasm with the physical reality and the constraints that come with being a national library. But the trend is good, and I feel like we're sort of on the cusp now of some real and substantive change. When you look under the cover there, what is that digital content that we are holding and many of the other national libraries holding? A lot of it is stuff that we've created through the process of digitization. We've been doing that now for quite a while. So since the mid-90s, probably Andrew Prescott's Beowulf project is one of our earlier ones. And we focused on that kind of unique material, as many of us have, that no other organizations have, and we can, by digitizing, make available more broadly. Examples: the International Dan Wang program is probably our longest running digital scholarship project at the library, about 20 years, and it's coming up on 20 years next year. It focuses on material coming from the Silk Road. So a lovely kind of vertical integration of caring for the analog content through digitizing and then providing access to that global community. They serve as a kind of a model for us sometimes. They demonstrate that it's really, really hard work. It takes years of sustained effort. It's not just about creating the digital resource, but it's about putting an infrastructure in place that enables scholars and researchers to make use of it. The Endangered Archives program is another a nice example. It's funded by Arcadia, and it's done about 150 projects now, gathered many tens of terabytes of digital material, sort of digitized from mostly sort of pre-industrial endangered archives around the world. Sort of material on the bottom right here that people are often dealing with, not in the best of condition, but Iranian photographs, audiovisual material from Andean culture, state papers from Libya, a huge range. We've also done some pretty large-scale book digitization projects. One example of that is one we did, supported by Microsoft. We did about 65,000 volumes of 19th century material. There's really good OCR, good quality text extraction, and that's made it possible for people to search and find them based on their textual content, not just the metadata. Another example I wanted to highlight for this audience is the British Newspaper Archive. So many of our large digitization projects have been done under partnership, and the British Newspaper Archive we're doing with a company called Bright Solid in the UK. They focus, do a lot of services focused on the family genealogy market. The archive holds about 7 million pages at the moment. We hope to work with them to do up to about 40 million pages over the next decade. It's an amazing resource, but again, I'll put it in perspective. We estimate we've got something like 750 million pages of newsprint at the British Library. So this incredible 40 million pages, when we eventually get there, will end up being something like 6% of the total. A tiny, tiny fraction, even though it will be a unique and incredibly valuable resource. One of the challenges that we have with things like the newspaper archive is integrating that as a major data collection, not just providing people views of one page at a time, into research across a wide range of fields. It includes thousands of drawings, millions of articles already, millions of advertisements for people who are interested in those billions of words in English text. So that's really big data, for us at least. It was large enough, it was shortlisted for the Big Data Project of the Year Award in 2012. I have one. And I think that recognizes not just the sheer volume of the data and its usage, but also the potential for analysis and supporting future research. Another example of a large-scale one, like several of our peer institutions, we've been doing some digitization with Google. We're doing about 250,000 volumes of 19th century material from actually 18th and 19th, from about 1700 to about 1870, as a French Revolution through to end of slavery in the U.S. When we engage in these projects, there are a couple of things we try to make sure of. So one is we need transparency in the way we work with the sort of third parties doing commercial digitization. An example there is actually the contract that and terms and conditions of that deal with Google are published on the web. Quite proud that we were able to do that last year. And we also try to make sure that the material can be used as widely as possible. So we're in this for the long term, and sometimes in the short term that can be frustrating for people, because in order to support the commercial engagement, they need a carve out, they need to make some money from their investment, but we make sure that in the future, hopefully as soon as possible, it can be very broadly used for research. An example there is the work that we've done with early books online. Much of that material will be available broadly from 2016. Another example, that the 60,000 volumes we did with Microsoft, that's now available under a public domain mark. That's roughly CC0 for out of copyright materials. That means anybody can use it for any purpose. Quite incredibly potentially useful resource for folks. Pardon my throat clearing. Digital techniques let us do some things in new ways. So we've become, many of us, quite complacent about a really big deal in arts and humanities, and that's the sort of digitization of manuscripts that are available through these sort of deep pan and zoom interfaces where anybody anywhere in the world can look at them in incredible levels of detail that was comparable to what you'd have to do in a rare books reading room in the past. Some of our curators are also starting to use new digital tools to support researchers. This is sort of a fun example on the left-hand side here from our philatelic collection. So we had someone come in who's studying the history of brewing and taxation from Australia, and we have a set of these tax stamps. You can see that one on the upper left there. It's got a sort of a hint at something, information that's hidden, but you can't quite read it. So Curator, our philatelic curator, was able to take a tool that transforms the color channels in the digital image, and it can sometimes make hidden information more readily visible. And on the bottom right, on the bottom left, you can see that it's pulled out the name of the brewery and the date of the cancellation of the tax stamp quite readily. So it was a sort of entertaining way we were able to make a researcher happy by applying slightly more sophisticated digital tools to this traditional material. We're also starting to do some different things with the digital content. So maybe I highlight a small example on the left, opening up speech archives. This is an AHRC funded project, and we're applying speech-to-text technology to a broad set of our audio recordings. And if successful, they're not always done on the clearest of conditions. It makes that large set of audio material readily accessible and should be able to increase its use in research. Example on the right-hand side here, the Impact Project has improved the OCR technology applied to historical text. There are a lot of unique problems associated with older material, text in historic documents that we're starting to get a handle on as well. We've also been learning to work with researchers and members of the public to enhance our digital content in some fun ways. So one of the big problems with historic cartographic material, historic maps, is discovering them. So if you could overlay them onto modern, accurate maps, then makes them, of course, much easier to find. So to do that accurately, you've got to georeference them. You've got to identify correspondence points between the historic and the new maps. And that's quite a lot of work. So we've been experimenting with crowdsourced techniques to do that georeferencing. A couple of twists, a little bit of competition, a little bit of a social media aspect. We had some really lovely experiences with it in the last year. We had a community georeference the first tranche of something under 1,000 maps in under a week, which for us was quite speedy. We managed to get them all georeferenced actually before we had announced that we had the service available to do the georeferencing. We did it again this fall, another 1,000 roughly maps. We now moved the bottleneck from georeferencing, which we thought would be the hard work, into moving the maps onto our online gallery. We've also been supporting researchers working with audio and video material. So this is a bunch of folks collaborating to annotate and discuss audio recording of poetry reading. One of the things that I found personally really exciting is enabling researchers to work with portions of our collections as data for analysis and research. So our web archiving team has made, I think, some great progress in this direction. And working with researchers, we've been extracting reusable and shareable data sets from it. Those are now available online, a wide range of them in multiple formats. So things like the graph of links, postcodes extracted from the web pages, and so on. We've also been, like all libraries, spending decades creating bibliographic metadata. We started to share that, the British National Bibliography, in a linked open data format. Providing it as linked open data embedded in the sort of linked open data ecosystem means that researchers can interlink with it, interrogate it, and integrate it into other information much more readily than they've been able to in the past. That's also available for download. There's a kind of end-user-friendly HTML approach to it, as well as a computer-friendly Sparkle linked open data query interface to it as well. In both cases, that data is available under a very generous open licensing So, so having the digital data, clearly not enough, and we're looking at ways to encourage the use of digital materials from organizations like the British Library and Research. We're running a series of competitions for research ideas that showcase, leverage our digital content. The details of the first one will be released in the next couple of weeks. I've been really pleased by the enthusiasm that we've been seeing for folks who want access to sort of the broad set of digital content that we hold. Winners are going to work with us to implement their ideas. We're going to provide really close technical support and also provide the IT, data, and networking infrastructure that they need to realize it. We have a lot, I think, to learn about how to support digital scholarship from researchers on site in the library, and I hope we'll learn from the ideas that we can support as well as the ones we can't. The infrastructure issues that were raised earlier today apply really clearly here as well. We don't have the infrastructure at either the discipline level or the national level or internationally that we would need to support this kind of work. Lastly, we need to recognize there's quite a big gap today between what curators and librarians can do and the sort of thing, support that they like to provide to researchers working with digital material. In order to tighten that, we've launched what's for us a fairly major training program in digital scholarship. So we studied, consulted, and took ideas from the best programs we saw out there, like the ones at Stanford, Oxford, King's, and others. And we've this fall launched a digital scholarship training program focused on the curatorial staff at the British Library. So roughly 10 one-day courses. We'll complete the first cycle by the end of March this year. And over the next couple of years, it will really transform the kind of support that we're able to provide for people working with the material that we've got now in bulk in digital form. So I'd like to kind of leave with a couple of comments. So one is, this is a quote from Franco Moretti at Stanford. So reading individual works is as irrelevant as describing the architecture of the building from a single brick or the layout of a city from a single church. We're trying to make that transition from reading individual items to looking at collections of information content as data. During the course of this conference, we'll see some great examples of curation, observational data, experimental data. We've seen some already this morning. And I think our challenge is to consider how information in books, in audio recordings, in moving images, in newspapers, web archives can also be used as data, right? So how can disciplines in the humanities, for example, take advantage of those techniques and those practices that are often quite well established in the empirical and experimental sciences? So look forward and working with you all together to reach a future where libraries full of digital information are deeply integrated into the practice of data-driven research. So thanks.